Alright, so welcome everybody. It is a lovely Saturday morning. All sorts of opportunity here for being creative and expressive and relaxing and having fun. So we are working on medieval watercolor letters. And if you look back through our previous videos, we have made videos for the letters A through R, which means that we are currently up to the letter S. Scottie, red snake. Alright, it's a plan. This is my niece, Scottie, and she likes red snakes that I'm doing for a children's book that I'm creating for them. So hello, welcome. My name is Lisa, and today we're going to work on a medieval illustrated letter S. And I'm doing this for my niece, Scottie. So I'm going to put in red snakes because I'm doing a children's book with a red snake in it, and those will be fun shapes for her to add. So I've got watercolor paper, got a pencil, a Jelly Roll 06 Sakura pen. It can be any sort of pen as long as it's waterproof because you do not want all of this water stuff that we're doing to smear the ink around. And then watercolors and a brush. And I have an eraser too. And it's worth noting that the watercolors I have are fairly inexpensive ones. I buy them in tubes and then I squish them into the pan, and that's a frugal way to do it, so that way if you end up not using it all, it just dries out, and then you just cover it up, and then you can re-wet it at some point and reuse it. So they don't go bad, they last forever, well, until you use them up. And it means that you always have supplies on hand. Alright, so we're gonna use a piece of watercolor paper. This happens to be Artist's Loft, but you can use whatever watercolor paper you would like to use. And let's get started. Alright, so we're going to start by drawing the S. S is a fun letter to do because it has all sorts of curves and shapes, and you can do the curves in a variety of different ways. You could do a big round curve, or you could do edged curves. I sort of like to do edged curves. And you always want to leave a margin around the edges of your paper so that if you decide to map this, which is safest for watercolor, you don't want the watercolor up against a piece of glass. So the map provides a little vertical space between the surface of the paper and the surface of the glass. And the edges of the paper are going to be covered by that mat. So you always want to leave the edges of the paper plain or with some sort of background image, but you don't want your actual drawn image to go right up against the edges of what you are drawing on. So leave a little space here. Trying to think, how do I want to do this? That's why you do these things in pencil first, so you can sort of sketch out ideas and see what strikes your fancy. Alright, if we start with that, alright, I sort of like that. I want to pull that forward a little. It's good to have a good eraser because this process often involves trying something, trying it again, making little tweaks to how the sections work. You know, part of me wants to make things more curvy, and then part of me wants to make things more angular. So I'm not sure that those are two sets of thoughts that really go together. Let's try making it a little more curvy. I think it's because I am going back and forth between the snaky shape idea and the medieval shape idea. I want to somehow incorporate both of those in the drawing, which is not the easiest thing to do. Alright, this here feels a little odd. As much as I wanted it bulby. I want it to be smooth. Alright, well, let's go with that as a base shape, because that feels sort of organic to me, which is the hope that I was going for here. Now, usually I would put all sorts of little flourishes on these, but with me having snaky thoughts, I'm not sure if flourishes really work on a snaky thought. Let's see. I could put a tongue coming out here. And an eye. I want to make it smiling, but if that whole thing is its mouth, how does it smile while it's got that? And then if I draw a smile over here, then that doesn't really work with the mouth thing. We will just let that go as it is. And now I want to put little spikes on it, but that doesn't really, well, I suppose my snake can have whatever kinds of shapes on it I want to. So this will be like a dragon snake. That is alright. It's the beauty of doing your own artwork. You can make it be whatever you want it to be. So just give them little spikes down the length of their sneaky dragony body. Alright, what else? So, you know, often I would put things intertwined inside the shape, but I don't really want things intertwined inside a snake shape. So I think I may end up giving him scales all the way down his body, which I won't draw out in pencil because that would be really hard to trace. But we will put some flowers out here. Maybe a little butterfly. Alright, I think that's enough to get us started. This would be a new and unusual letter for us. So whatever pen you use, you want it to be waterproof, and you want to remember that pen goes down wet. And as much as it might seem like it dries instantly, there is still a little bit of drying time, so do not drag the side of your hand along on the art, because you might risk having the ink smear. Alright, so we're doing the outlines of the letter S. Tracing this all with waterproof ink. Give him his tongue. Put in the little spikes. So how is everybody doing today? Hope you're doing alright. Hope you are restful and relaxed. It's good to try to find a way to enjoy every day. Life goes by so quickly. You blink your eyes and time has passed. It's good to enjoy the time you have. Alright, so we're nearing the end of the snake tail. Put in butterfly. And the butterflies' antennas. Alright, now let's put in some scales for the snake. Try to do this fairly quickly so that we do not spend too much time sitting here scaling the snake. But usually I do all sorts of detailing on medieval letters with flowers intertwining in them and so on. And since we won't be doing that sort of stuff with the snake, we should at least give it scales so that it has some sorts of details in here. So I'm actually thinking as I'm working on this that instead of making this a standard red color, maybe I should make it one of my pearlescent red colors. I've got some special pearlescent colors here that I bought as part of this project to make the children's book for my two nieces. Most of my normal colors here in my watercolor kit are normal kinds of flat colors, we'll call them. But then I bought a couple of pearlescent and shimmery colors in the red and pink range, since one of my nieces wanted a red snake and the other niece wanted a spiky pink fish. So let's give it a shot once I get done with the quick snake scaling. You don't have to be too precise when you're doing something like snake scaling, because we're going to be putting color over the top of this, and the scales are going to just be an underlying texture. But still, it gives sort of a shape to the overall creature, so you do want to think about whether they're squarish or ovalish or those kinds of things. This can be sort of meditative, to see here, filling in little shapes with repetitive patterns. I had an art class back when I was young, and the teacher loved to do these kinds of projects where you would work in different sections of an artwork and make repetitive shapes. It's very relaxing and soothing. I think people all over the world, think of the people who make mandalas and people who do chanting and singing. There's a soothing nature to repetition. It has been with us since the beginning of mankind. Right, coming around to the bottom. You just sort of fall into a zone when you're doing something like this. We're getting close to done. We're nearly down at the tail. Alright. Right, there we go. So now we've got a letter S with lots of scales and spikes with the mouth area, which I think I want to put in some things like that. Alright, that is a starting point. Anything else I could put in there? No, I think if I put too much other stuff, it's already got a lot of detail with all of the little scale bits. So I think it's probably better to stay with that and have it be that much. Alright, so the ink part is done. So now we're going to let that dry for just a nanosecond while we talk about the painting options. And let's see what paint colors I have here. I have a rose madder, alizarin, monochrome red purple. I have the pearlescent red. And I think I'm liking the pearlescent red idea for the shimmer that it'll give us. Now I don't have space for that on my normal. Right, so this says pearlescent pink. I have a feeling that when I said pearlescent pink, I actually meant the pearlescent red. This is the trouble of labeling things with their incorrect names. Yeah, see, I have a permanent pink. That's a copper. Well, I suppose the way to find out for sure. Trying to find my Sharpie. Oh, and here comes a cat. Cat wants to participate. Alright, fine, we'll use a gold Sharpie. I'm gonna relabel this pearlescent pink. Hello, sweetie. To red. That Sharpie doesn't show up very well. Alright, I'm gonna find a little scrap of spare watercolor paper. This is why it's good to have to keep all your scraps for the watercolor paper when you are cutting pieces off of things, because it comes in very handy for this sort of testing stuff. All right. Funny, I have cat hairs all over my extra palette here. Alright, so I believe that the pearlescent pink looks like the same color as what that is in there, in that spot right there. Which granted is a little pinker than I was hoping for, but I want it to be sparkly, so I like the idea that it's the pearlescent. The cat is hunkering down right on top of the test watercolor paper I just put down that I wanted to work with. Isn't that the way of the cat? You are such a good cat. Well, as much as I want the shininess of it, I just do not think that I want it to be pink. I want it to be red. And the other reds that I have are not really a shimmery red. Right, which has me think another idea. Fortunately, I have lots and lots of watercolor sets in the house. Well, none of these are really red either. Let's try this. So I have an Artist Loft metallic set. I actually have a bunch of these metallic sets because I use these for the origami that I do. And then this metallic set it's strange that 3 of them are completely missing. But that has a red which is specifically shimmery. And it's not quite as bright of a red as I would want. But I think it will do. And now the cat is over here climbing on and eating everything. Come on, sweetie. Alright, well in that case, we don't really need to test because we know what we're doing. Cat, that isn't exactly where I would like you to sit down. No, sweetie? Sweetie, that's exactly where I'm painting. Exactly where I'm painting. I know you do not understand these things. You are a good kitty. You are a good purring kitty. You are just so happy right now, aren't you? Alright, sweetie, this is where I need to paint. You're making it difficult to paint. Alright, come on, sweetie. You have to move out of the way. Alright. Come on, sweetie. I know you don't understand. You say I like to lay there. Sweetie. Alright. Hopefully we got the kitty relocated so that we can paint over here without the cat interfering. Gonna go with shimmery colors. Do I have this red? This one's more like a red purple, so I think I will stay with this one that's more like a red red. We will see how this works. I am actively fighting with the cat who wants to come back and lay on the snake to try to keep the cat at least off the snake area. Alright, sweetie? Alright. Get some water. Oh, she's back. Sweetie, that's paint. Paint is not for eating. That's a brush. Alright, sweetie, come on. Come on, them out of the way. Alright, this is the extra long drawn out version of doing this, as I have to fend off the cat in 80 directions. Kitten. The cat keeps there. Yes, just settle down. Right, cat is settling down on the keyboard, so now I'm worried about the cat typing something to you, but at least the cat is not on the snake itself. Alright. So this is a little pinkish, but maybe not too bad. And I want to leave the underside not quite painted because I'm hoping that I can add a little highlight for the belly area. And also I'm hoping that if I put on a second layer of color, once this first layer dries, that the red will darken up into more of the red that I am aiming for. So normally with the medieval letters there's not really a sense of shadow because they're fairly flat styles of illustrations. It's not a three-dimensional object out there in the world, but this snake here is more of a three-dimensional object. So I'm thinking a little more about how the light is striking this snake and how to give it a bit of dimension to it. You want to think about what the source of light is in this space that you are painting. Normally I like to put the light in the top right. Not that I actually paint a light, but that's where I consider the light is coming from. And that would mean things on the top right of the object would be brighter, and things on the bottom left of the object would tend to be a little darker due to the way the shadows fall. And also, if something is rounder, then the higher areas will tend to catch light and glint. And then the lower areas on either side will tend to be more in shadow. And shadow tends to mean darker. And with watercolors, darker tends to mean more paint because the light of the object comes from the light of the paper shining from the actual light in the room, going through the paint, bouncing off the paper, and then coming back towards your eyeballs. So that gives watercolors a kind of glowy feeling that you don't get in pretty much any other kind of painting except for like stained glass. Because normally with paint, the pigment is solid and it blocks the light of the room from getting through to the paper. But in watercolor, the paints that you're using let the light through. So the light from the room goes through the layer of paint, hits the paper, bounces back out at your eye, and sort of glows from behind. And the more paint you put on, the more that you block that from happening, so it gets darker and darker as a result. Alright, so on one hand I want a belly, but on the other hand that is the very bottommost area of this snake. So I would want that to be darker and not lighter. But what I could do is give it a copper belly. And that way it's a different tone, but also still darker. I'm trying to make it darker around the top and bottom to leave that center point a little higher to give it some dimension. Alright, I like the shimmer on that. It might be hard to see it in the video version that you have, but there is a very nice shimmer to that feel. Alright, I don't want to make the mouth too much of a different color, since it's all part of the same snake. And also because I think it'll be nice to have the contrast between this color red on the scaly part with all the textures versus the same color on a fairly straightforward part. See, it even looks a little different, even though it's the same color when it's in the scaled versus the non-scaled area. I have to be careful not to get my hand into the existing wet paint, because then I would get little palm prints everywhere. Alright. Alright, when you're doing adjacent areas, like the copper in here, you always want one area to dry completely before you start working in the adjacent area, because if you have two wet colors right side by side, they tend to blend into each other, and then they turn into often a muddy gray, which is not what you are aiming for. So you want to think about letting one area dry before you start working on another area that touches it. So it's fine for me to work on this green area over here, since it doesn't touch anything. It's not going to cause a problem. And it'd be fine for me to work on the butterfly. Now for the butterfly, I'd have to think about what I want to do it in. I think I might make it in copper. I have a little bit of copper left over here in the corner. I keep the metallics in the corner of my palette area since I like to use them for highlights. So if I make a copper butterfly, alright. And another question is what color I should make the spikes. I can make them copper, but I think I'd like a little bit of extra color. Make them like this dark silver. Well, let's put the copper in first. Is this dry? Oh, it's pretty dry. All right. Let's get the copper in there. See how that looks. I think I need to do a couple layers of this copper to get it as dark as I want it. Right now it's seeming a little light. And I would like this underbelly to be a little darker. And it's fairly close to the pink, which is fine for the underbelly since it's a part of the snake, but it again makes me think that I want something a little more contrasty for the spikes so that they stand out a little better. Yeah, so like if I put it in there a little speckled, it gives more of that scale sense. And we might put a little even just in here to continue that. Give this a sense that's more organic and not quite as rigid. All right, just put a little more. Is this the copper? All right, get a little more copper out. That's the benefit of tubes. When you need a little more, you just squish a little more out of your tube. Tube goes back and is infinite. Just poke this in. Just giving a little bit of texture to the copper. A little bit of darkness to where there would be more shadows as it came around under here. All right. All right, so let that dry. Make a couple of petals. When you're doing petals, it's a good idea to make a few of them that are not touching. Let those dry completely. Come back, make a few more that are not touching. Let those dry completely, and that way the petals end up looking like individual petals. If you do them all at the same time, they often look like a big blur. Alright, let's work on these spikes. And again, I was thinking about making them this nice dark color over here. This pink should be dry enough up here that the color up here will not run into it. Alright, so we're just filling in all the little details. Good joke. Remember that watercolors dry lighter than when they first go on, so we'll have to see how dark this dries, and this may need a second coat to really still pop out against the shimmering red of the body. Well, I have the house phone set to be quiet, and somehow it still manages to make noise. Let's do the body in that color. What color should the tongue be? I feel like the tongue should be something bright, like yellow. What color are snake tongues? Imagine they're black, but I don't really want a black tongue. Maybe like green. I'll do green. There we go. Got a green tongue. Oh, hey, Laura. Good to see you. we'll just put another round of, I'm just trying to figure out the best angle to get on this. Another round just to get the spikes a little darker. All right. All right, so hopefully you can see in the video that that does end up making it a bit darker to put a second layer of color on, because you are blocking more light from reaching the paper and then bouncing back out to your eyeballs. And also right now it's wet, so as it dries it'll get a little lighter, but it'll still be darker than it used to be. Let's put some more petals on our flower. Alrighty. So I think the snake has some dimension to it due to putting some shading in it and a little bit of darker around the edges. I could still add a little more extra paint along this sweep here. And maybe along this inner sweep here and that inner sweep there. Just to emphasize where the deepest curves are happening. Maybe along in here. But in general, with these kinds of shapes, I'm not looking to make them realistically dimensional. I'm just trying to give them some sort of a hint that it's an curved object. Thank you, Laura. So just a hint that it's got curves and it's got some bulges and dimensions and stuff like that. And I could, of course, poke at this all day long, but I think you get the gist of it. The gist of how the different curves are. All right. So we've got a letter S done as a reddish snake for my niece, Scottie. You can, of course, do whatever kinds of symbols or shapes you want. This is my cat coming back. Now, of course, the paper is wet, so I do not want the cat actually stepping on the paper. Come on, sweetie. Come on over here. Over here. Kitten? Hello. You a zombie? Come over this way. Just trying to get my cat to, the cat's being very sleepy and sluggish and also completely convinced that she wants to lay down in this spot. Alright, so this is the letter S in an illustrated style with the assistance of my black cat, who is just wanting to curl up and be a help. Alright, so let me know if you have any questions about painting a letter S, in this particular case a snaky sort of creature, and I am happy to help.